This is a Fox News alert. As we have been reporting tonight, there is justice moments ago in Jordan. That country acting swiftly, retaliating against ISIS following the horrible burning of one of its fighter pilots. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Eric Shawn. It is unspeakable. ISIS beheads hostages, puts their severed heads on poles, buries women and children alive. And now the world has seen the unforgivable savagery of radical Islamic terrorism firsthand. A stark and repulsive reminder of the offensive terror ideology that has declared war on the West and war on us. And now we are told Jordanian authorities have put this convicted terrorist and another one to death minutes ago. They did warn, if any harm came to their pilot at the hand of ISIS, she would be executed. Sajida al-Rishawi, an al-Qaeda sympathizer whose suicide vest did not go off during a terrorist bombing in Amman in 2005. That bombing at a Radisson hotel killed 60 people. She hanged, reports Jordan authorities, along with the top aide to Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Jordan, of course, striking back just hours after that online video purportedly released by the Islamic State appeared to show that captured pilot burned to death. You see him there, moments before that happened. He is 26-year-old Lieutenant Moaz al-Kashabi. He was captured in December when his airplane crashed on Christmas Eve. And after that F-16 crashed in Iraq or Syria, the de facto capital of ISIS's self-styled caliphate, he was the first pilot from the U.S.-led coalition to be captured. And news of his apparent burning to death in that cage came just days after ISIS released a video showing the reported beheading of Japanese journalist Kenji Goto. Jordan, of course, had offered to swap the al-Qaeda prisoner, Sajida al-Rishawi, for that pilot, but that was all in vain because now we are told those militants actually conducted that horrible, unspeakable burning on January 3rd, a month ago. So those negotiations were all in vain and a complete and utter farce. However, of course, they did not deliver any of that proof that he still was alive because he was not. Jordan tonight acting very quickly, executing that Ms. Rishawi. But just how important is this death to ISIS? And can we expect more acts in Jordan and by ISIS in the coming days? It is now just after 6 a.m. in Amman, Jordan, 11:02 in the Eastern Time here in America. We're in Washington, D.C. They're asking those questions. Lisa Daftari is a Fox News contributor and Mideast journalist and joins us now. Lisa, your reaction to Jordan acting so quickly against radical Islamic terrorism?
Good evening, Eric. This is a very courageous act by the Jordanian military, the king moving very quickly to retaliate and to act upon what they said they would do. They did not consult the coalition. They did not look around for global approval of what they would do. They went ahead and they took action to their own hands. The other argument that has to be made here is that will death now deter these brutal savages who are only motivated by death and by martyrdom and by killing in the name of Islam or radical Islam? So, will this be the solution to now going and retaliating in this fashion? Probably not. This is one way to stand up and to show the terrorists that when threats are then countered with threats, that people actually go through with them.
Well, Lisa, even though they may do that, you know what's going to happen. Tomorrow we're going to see the headlines. They call her a martyr. They'll be calling her a hero, saying that she was sacrificed for the better good of radical Islamic terror to try to get more recruits. What do we do when they do that? And how can we finally try and defeat this insidious ideology? Is it even possible?
Right, and the only way to do it is to have this be only one aspect of a multi-pronged approach to defeating global terrorism. And again, we don't want this to only be the face of now, terrorists only contained to ISIS and is only in Syria and only in Iraq. Just over the weekend, our administration was talking about not even putting the Taliban on our terror list. And you know what? We should learn and take a hint from the Jordanian government, who so bravely went ahead and took matters into their own hands while we're busy deciding whether or not these are terrorists or not. Today, our Pentagon spokesperson actually came out and said ISIS is not as agile as they once were, as if they're trying out for a varsity tennis squad or something. You know what? We have to catch up with reality, and it's going on. And it's not just against the U.S., it's against the rest of the world, and it falls into one simple equation. You're either with them or you're with us. You either want freedom or you want death, and we have to catch up with that. And one other thing, the timing of the release of this video, while we were so busy celebrating and calling it a victory in Kobani, We said the Kurdish fighters there were able to contain ISIS from going forward and to regain control of Kobani. That's very true. But that's not where that's such a small and isolated victory. And to stop there and to have Secretary Kerry going around on the weekend program talking about this victory, ISIS wanted to show us that they still have control. They released this video right now as a victory lap for themselves.
Well, Lisa, you mentioned Kobani. I mean, it is a victory. It was taken back. ISIS promises and vows to try to retake that town. But you're right. 75% of the airstrikes so far that have occurred since August have basically been around Kobani. ISIS has only expanded during these airstrikes. So what do? We
have to look at this as a much larger problem than it is. Again, not isolated to Syria and Iraq, not just isolated to ISIS and the way that they're moving about in Syria and Iraq, because as we know, it's an ideology. It's flexible. It moves. They recruit people on social media. They're here in the U.S. They get their tentacles on young people. If you look at the quality of this video, Eric, I don't know if you were able to watch it.
You know, it is unbelievable. It is just absolutely, it is so stunning, and it is so offensive. It is so repulsive. It is sickening. Just think about this, Lisa, for a moment. We're on television. People in America are at home. We're relaxing. We're basically safe. We're in a civilized society. We have surgical advances. We sent a man to the moon. You know, the pilot, very sophisticated, highly educated Moaz al-Kashabe, flew that F-16. Think of the avionics and the sophistication in that airplane, and what brought him down? A stick. A stick with a rag by a lighter, according to that video, lit by some masked goon who then lit it on some dirt with a trail of, I suppose, gasoline, like worse than a caged animal, a caged human being. Seeing that flame come toward him and then engulf his whole body while he was helpless as that crowd, apparently, according to those sound effects, cheered on. What have we come to? What is this group come to? And how did we get here when you have people like this who do this? I mean, during the Vietnam War, during the Nazi period, there were war prisoners, and I imagine when that bulldozer, according to the tape, put rebar and concrete on top of that cage and flattened it, that was a symbolic gesture by them, because I bet those were some of the remains of the buildings that had been bombed by the coalition. How do you deal with that ideology that did something as heinous as this, Lisa?
It's so horrific. And if we even forget for one moment, because again, you look at what happened with the attack in France. It was for a couple of days, it was just Sweet Charlie, and then over the weekend it was I Am Kenji Goto, and now it's the pilot. And you know what? We're going to forget again in a few days. But they come back and they remind us, and these are inconvenient facts for those who still remain against the reality, just impenetrable to these horrific images, to the fact, to what we're watching and witnessing go on. And again, not just by ISIS in Syria and Iraq, but by Boko Haram in Africa, and by the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and by al-Qaeda in Yemen and in Qatar and in all these different parts. This is a global war. We don't want to call it that. It's not partisan politics. We're not
Lisa,
we're not anti-reality. We are all American, and we have to catch up with the truth and catching up with us.
And radical Islamic terrorism hit our country 25 years ago here in New York City with the shooting of Meir Kahane in the Lexington Hotel on 48th Street by El Sayed Nosair. They were here. We didn't know it. They were part of a cell led by the blind sheikh. And 3 years later, his cohorts went on to bomb the World Trade Center in the first terrorist attack that later on, that same ideology took down the World Trade Center. Lisa Daftari has been with us.